The first thing Lin Yushi noticed was the smell. Not the antiseptic tang of a hospital. Sharp and clinical. Not the stale air of an exam hall. Thick with anxiety and recycled oxygen. It was something far more ordinary. Far more domestic. The unmistakable scent of dorm room number 3 in Building 7 on the East Campus of Jindu University. A peculiar mixture of instant noodles, cheap floral air freshener, and the faint mustiness that came from drying clothes indoors during the rainy season. The combination was so specific, so intimately familiar, that her breath caught in her throat. Her eyes snapped open. The ceiling was wrong. The ceiling in her cramped rental studio, the one she had moved into after everything fell apart, had been covered in water stains that looked like a map of some forgotten continent, with cracks spreading like veins across the yellowed paint. That ceiling had been the backdrop to countless sleepless nights, to panic attacks that left her gasping for air, to the slow, grinding realization that her life as she had known it was over. This ceiling was clean, white, dotted with glow-in-the-dark star stickers that she had personally put up during freshman week. Standing on a wobbly desk chair while Meng Yao held it steady and told her she was going to break her neck. The stars were arranged in a pattern that was supposed to be the Big Dipper but was probably inaccurate. She had never bothered to check. They had just looked pretty. Yushi sat up so fast her head spun. The world tilted. Then righted itself. The fluorescent numbers on her nightstand clock read 10:47 p.m. February 24th. A Sunday. February 24th. The day before the second semester of her sophomore year was supposed to start. No, she whispered, her voice scratchy and unfamiliar, like an instrument that had been locked in a case for years. No, no, no. Her hands flew to her face, tracing the contours of her skin. Smooth, unlined. No fine wrinkles at the corners of her eyes from years of crying herself to sleep. No permanent furrow between her brows from the constant stress of being blamed for something she hadn't done. She scrambled out of bed, the rough fabric of her dorm-issued sheets dragging against her legs, and stumbled to the small mirror tacked to the closet door. The girl staring back at her was painfully young. Long black hair pulled into a messy bun that was already threatening to unravel. Stray strands sticking to her temples. Cheeks still carrying the soft roundness of youth, unmarked by the hollows that hardship would later carve. Dark eyes, wide and luminous, filled with something between terror and disbelief. She was wearing an old t-shirt, a faded gray thing with the university logo printed on the front, and a pair of shorts that she had bought during freshman orientation. This was her face, her body, her 20-year-old self. Yushi pressed her palm against the cold glass of the mirror, half expecting it to shatter and reveal the truth. But it didn't. The glass was solid, unyielding. The reflection stared back at her, real and present. She was 20 again. She was a sophomore again. She was back. The memories hit her like a physical force, and she gripped the edge of the desk to keep from falling. The wooden surface was cool and familiar under her fingers, the same desk where she had spent countless nights studying. The same desk where she had cried when her mother called to say she couldn't afford the spring semester tuition. The same desk where she had sat when the disciplinary committee handed down its verdict. For years of ruined reputation. For years of her parents' disappointed faces. Of their carefully worded phone calls that asked, "How are you?" but meant, "What did you do?" For years of being escorted out of the university administration building with a termination of enrollment notice clutched in her shaking hands. The paper already damp with tears she couldn't hold back, causing serious harm to the reputation of the university through malicious interpersonal behavior. The official document had read. The words were clinical, bureaucratic, completely disconnected from the reality of what had happened. She had been 17 years old when she started college. 21 when she was expelled. She had never done anything malicious in her entire life. And at the center of it all, Zhao Mengyao, her best friend since freshman orientation. The girl who had sat next to her during the welcome ceremony. The one who had leaned over and whispered, "Is it just me? Or does the dean look like a character from a video game?" And made Yushi laugh so hard she snorted. The girl who had shared her instant noodles when Yushi's meal card ran out. Who had braided her hair before formal events, who had stayed up with her through entire nights of studying for finals, the girl who had been her sister in every way that mattered. The girl who had destroyed her. Yushi's breath came in short, sharp gasps. She forced herself to breathe slowly, counting to 10 the way her therapist had taught her. The therapist she had needed after the depression diagnosis, after the panic attacks that came without warning, triggered by nothing and everything, after she had to move back in with her parents in their small apartment and face their silent, helpless grief. 1, 2, 3. The numbers ticked by like a lifeline. You're okay, she told her reflection. The girl in the mirror looked skeptical. You're okay, you're fine. This hasn't happened yet, but it would happen, unless she changed something. The question was, what could she change? The disaster was already set in motion. Meng Yao was already dating 3 people, or she would be soon. The lies were already being told. The only variable was Yushi's role in the story. In her past life, she had been the loyal friend, the fixer, the one who covered for Meng Yao, lied for her, protected her, and when everything collapsed, she had been the one left holding the wreckage. What if, this time, she simply didn't participate? What if she stepped back, stayed quiet, and let Meng Yao's house of cards fall on its own? The thought was terrifying. It felt like betrayal, but so did being sacrificed to save someone who wouldn't hesitate to destroy her. The door to the dorm room creaked open, and Yushi's heart stopped. Meng Yao stepped in, her phone pressed to her ear, her free hand waving in an animated gesture. She was wearing a cream-colored cardigan over a sundress that looked expensive, her hair perfectly curled, her makeup, even at nearly 11 at night, flawless. She looked like she had walked out of a magazine spread, and in the dim light of the dorm room, she was radiant. This was Zhao Meng Yao at her peak, before everything fell apart. Yes, I know, I miss you too. Meng Yao cooed into the phone, her voice carrying that specific honeyed tone she reserved for her boyfriends, the tone that was sweet and warm and completely manufactured. I said I would call you when I got back. Didn't I? Don't be so needy. She noticed Yushi standing by the mirror and flashed a brilliant smile, waving her fingers in greeting. Yushi's throat closed up. She wanted to say something, wanted to warn her, wanted to scream at her, wanted to tell her that the path she was on would lead to nothing but destruction. But she stayed silent. Okay, I have to go. My roommate is waiting for me. A pause. The smile on Meng Yao's face softened into something that almost looked genuine. Yes. You too. Good night. She ended the call and tossed her phone onto her bed, kicking off her heels with practiced ease. You're still awake. I thought you'd be dead to the world by now. You're always the first to pass out. Yushi stared at her. Meng Yao frowned, tilting her head. What? Do I have something on my face? Is my mascara smudged? No. Yushi managed. Her voice sounded strange even to her own ears, like she was speaking through layers of cotton. No. You look beautiful. Meng Yao's face split into a grin. Ah, babe. Are you feeling sentimental because we're starting a new semester tomorrow? Don't worry. We're still going to be unstoppable. Sophomore year is going to be our year. She bounced over and threw her arms around Yushi in a hug that smelled like jasmine perfume and the faint trace of cigarette smoke from whatever party she had been at. The hug was warm, familiar, the kind of embrace that had once made Yushi feel safe and loved. Now it made her skin crawl. Yushi's body went rigid. She forced herself not to pull away, not to flinch. She had to act normal. She had to play her role. If she started acting strange now, Meng Yao would notice. And Meng Yao noticing things was dangerous. In her previous life, on this exact night, Meng Yao had told Yushi everything. She had sat cross-legged on her bed, eyes bright with excitement, and whispered, I met someone, then, with a nervous laugh. Actually, 3 someones. And Yushi, loyal and trusting and foolish, had listened. She had given advice. She had offered to cover for her. She had become, without realizing it, an accomplice. Not this time. I'm tired, Yushi said, pulling away from the hug. I'm going to bed. Early class tomorrow. You're not going to ask about my night. Meng Yao pouted, but there was something calculating in her eyes. Always calculating. Yushi had never noticed it before, the way Meng Yao's expressions shifted like a performer changing masks. But now it was as clear as day. Tell me tomorrow, Yushi said, climbing into her bed and pulling the covers up to her chin. I really need to sleep. Meng Yao stared at her for a moment, clearly thrown off by the lack of interest. In the original timeline, Yushi had been an eager audience member, hanging on every word, laughing at every joke, soaking in every detail of Meng Yao's romantic adventures. She had been the perfect confidant. Fine, Meng Yao said finally, her voice carrying a hint of petulance. Sleep well, I guess. Yushi turned her face to the wall and closed her eyes. But sleep didn't come. She lay awake, hyper-aware of every sound in the room, the soft rustle of Meng Yao's clothes as she changed into her pajamas, the click of her phone as she typed out messages to one of her 3 boys, the contented little sigh she made when she slipped between her own sheets. In her past life, Yushi had been a loyal friend, a good person, the kind of person who put others before herself, who believed that friendship meant sacrifice, who thought that being there for someone meant never saying no. It had cost her everything. The little alarm clock on her nightstand ticked through the hours. Midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Yushi stared at the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, watching them pulse faintly in the darkness, and made a decision. This time, she would be quiet, she would be invisible, she would mind her own business and focus on the only thing that had ever been truly hers, her own mind, her own future, her own life. The alarm on her phone was set for 6. She had a full schedule ahead. The CPA exam preparation course started next week. The National Accounting Excellence Competition registration was due in 3 weeks. She needed to rebuild her GPA, apply for scholarships, start building a record that no amount of gossip or scandal could touch. She had goals now, big ones, and Zhao Mengyao, with her tangled web of lies and her casual cruelty, was not going to take them away from her a second time. Not now, not ever. The first morning of the new semester arrived cold and gray, with clouds hanging low over the campus like a blanket. Yushi woke before her alarm, her internal clock already recalibrated to the schedule she had kept in her past life. She slipped out of bed, moving with practiced silence so she wouldn't disturb Meng Yao's sleep. The other girl was curled up under her comforter, her face peaceful, her dark hair spread across the pillow like a fan. For a moment, Yushi just stood there, watching her. It was strange, knowing what she knew, seeing this sleeping girl, so innocent and vulnerable, and knowing that behind the pretty face was a mind capable of calculated destruction. In her past life, Yushi had never seen it coming. She had been too blinded by affection, too convinced that their friendship was real. But it had been real, hadn't it? The laughter, the secrets, the late-night conversations about dreams and fears and hopes for the future. Those moments had been genuine. That was what made the betrayal so devastating, not that Meng Yao had lied to other people, but that she had been capable of lying to Yushi all along. Yushi turned away and gathered her toiletries. She didn't have time for philosophical questions about the nature of friendship. She had a life to rebuild. The bathroom at the end of the hall was empty at 6:15. And Yushi took her time under the hot water, letting it wash away the last traces of sleep. The shower stall was small and cramped, the water pressure inconsistent, the tiles stained with years of hard water deposits. It was the same bathroom she had used every day of her freshman and sophomore years. She had missed it. She had missed everything about this place, the creaky floorboards, the unreliable heating, the way the library smelled like old paper and dust. She had missed being a student, being young, having a future ahead of her. The face that looked back at her from the mirror was still young, still unfamiliar in its smoothness, but there was something different in the eyes now, a hardness that hadn't been there the first time around, a wariness that came from knowing that the people closest to you could hurt you the most. You can do this, she told herself, one day at a time, one exam at a time. She dressed in a simple white blouse and dark jeans, the most unremarkable outfit she could find. She wanted to be invisible. She wanted to be the kind of person that the gossip mill had no interest in. She had learned the hard way that attention was dangerous, especially when Zhao Mengyao was at the center of everyone's attention. The walk to teaching building 2 was quiet. The campus was still mostly asleep. Only a few early risers crossing the paths with coffee cups in hand and backpacks slung over their shoulders. The cherry blossom trees that lined the main walkway were bare, their branches reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. Yushi had always loved this time of day. The quiet before the chaos. The moment when the campus felt like hers alone. The classroom for intermediate financial accounting was on the third floor. A large lecture hall with tiered seating and a whiteboard that covered most of the front wall. Yushi arrived 20 minutes early and chose a seat in the middle of the second row, close enough to see the board clearly. Far enough from the front to avoid being the professor's first call on target. She pulled out her notebook and a pen, reviewing the syllabus she had already memorized. Intermediate financial accounting, cost management, business statistics, economics of global markets. 4 core courses, plus the CPA prep course that met twice a week in the evenings. It was a heavy load, but she had carried heavier. Other students filtered in gradually. Some she recognized from her past life, faces she had seen in the hallways. Names she had heard in passing. A girl named Lu Xian who had sat next to her in microeconomics last semester and always asked good questions. A tall boy named Wang Jun who had a habit of raising his hand to ask unnecessarily complicated questions that were clearly designed to show off. A quiet student named Zhou Wei who never spoke in class but always got the highest exam scores. And then, the door opened, and the air in the room seemed to shift. He walked in like he owned the space around him. Not through arrogance but through a kind of quiet certainty. He was tall, with sharp features and dark hair that fell just slightly over his forehead. He wore a simple gray sweater, no logos or brands, and carried a backpack that was clearly well used but well maintained. His eyes swept the room once, cataloging the available seats with the efficiency of someone who was used to assessing situations quickly. His gaze landed on the empty seat next to Yushi. Of course it did. He sat down without a word, pulling out a textbook that was already filled with sticky notes and margin annotations. The edges of the pages were worn, as if they had been flipped through many times. Yushi's eyes caught the title, Intermediate Financial Accounting, 8th edition. The same textbook she had. The same edition. She looked at him more closely. He was familiar in a way that made her stomach drop. In her past life, she had known him by reputation only. Lu Chen, top of the grade every semester since freshman year, winner of the provincial accounting competition 2 years running. The kind of student that professors mentioned in passing as an example of what hard work and natural talent could achieve. They had never spoken. In her previous life, Yushi had been too entangled in Mingyao's drama to even think about academic rivals. She had been too busy managing someone else's life to build her own. But she knew about him. Everyone knew about him. He caught her staring and raised an eyebrow. Is there something on my face? Yushi looked away, heat rising to her cheeks. She could feel the flush spreading across her neck, and she hated herself for it. No. Sorry. I was just. She gestured vaguely. Never mind. It's okay. His voice was calm, neutral. You were staring. I was curious why. You're Lu Chen. I am. I've heard about you. Good things. I hope. You're the top of the grade. That's not saying much. Our grade only has 200 people. It says a lot. She turned back to her notebook, signaling that the conversation was over. The last thing she needed was to get into a discussion with the most competitive person in the department on the first day of class. But he didn't seem to take the hint. What's your name? Lin Yushi. He repeated it, testing the syllables on his tongue. Yushi. That's a pretty name. Thanks. Do you have a study group for this class? I don't do study groups. Why not? Because I work better alone. He considered this, then nodded slowly. Fair enough. But if you change your mind. Team 5 is always looking for serious people. Team 5. The informal name for the group of top accounting students who studied together for competitions and exams. In her past life, Yushi had barely been aware of their existence. They operated in a different world, one of awards and honors and faculty recognition. I'll keep that in mind, she said, though she had no intention of following up. Professor Zhang arrived precisely at 8:00 a.m. A heavy-set man in an ill-fitting suit who had a reputation for being tough but fair. His hair was thinning on top, and his glasses were perpetually sliding down his nose. He distributed the syllabus without preamble and launched directly into the first lecture, his voice carrying the rhythmic cadence of someone who had delivered the same material for 20 years. Financial accounting is the language of business. He began, writing the words on the board in large, blocky characters. If you don't speak the language, you can't understand what's happening in any organization. By the end of this course, you will be fluent. Yushi took notes. Her handwriting was neat and careful, each line of text building on the last. She had always been good at this, the discipline of learning, the satisfaction of understanding a difficult concept, the way knowledge accumulated like compound interest. In her past life, she had let that skill atrophy, too distracted by other people's drama to invest in her own growth. This time, she planned to sharpen it into a weapon. Beside her, Lu Qin was doing the same thing. They wrote in near-perfect synchronization. Two students who had learned that the best way to succeed was to pay attention to the details. The scratch of their pens against paper was almost musical. When Professor Zhang paused for questions, Lu Chen's hand went up immediately. Regarding the impairment testing of goodwill, he said, his voice calm and measured, the textbook mentions the two-step process, but I've read that the FASB has been considering eliminating step 1 entirely. Will we be covering the proposed changes? Or should we focus on the current standard? Professor Zhang's face lit up with barely concealed delight. An excellent question, Mr. Liu. The proposed changes are still under review, but they represent a significant shift in how we think about impairment. We'll touch on them later in the semester, but for now, focus on the existing framework. I appreciate you doing the reading ahead of time. Yushi glanced at him. He was already writing something in the margin of his notes. Not even acknowledging the praise. He had asked the question because he genuinely wanted to know the answer, not because he wanted to impress the professor. Overachiever, she thought, but there was no malice in the word, only a grudging respect. The lecture continued. Professor Zhang moved through the material at a brisk pace, covering the conceptual framework of financial reporting, the qualitative characteristics of useful financial information, and the basic elements of financial statements. Yushi's hand cramped from writing, but she didn't stop. She couldn't afford to stop. She had 2 years to rebuild her life, to accumulate enough achievements and credentials that no amount of gossip or scandal could touch her. By the time class ended at 9:40, she had filled 14 pages of her notebook. Not bad for a first day. She packed up her things quickly, intending to get to the library before the rush. But as she stood, she noticed a piece of paper sliding across the desk toward her. It was a sticky note, blue, in neat, precise handwriting. It said, asterisk, your notes on the Markov chain example are wrong. Page 37. Asterisk. Yushi looked up, but Lu Qin was already walking away, his bag slung over one shoulder. Not looking back, she blinked. Then she opened her textbook to page 37 and reviewed her notes. He was right. She had copied down the transitional probability incorrectly. Using 67 instead of 76, the error would have cascaded through her entire study session if she hadn't caught it. She would have spent hours working with flawed data, building her understanding on a foundation that was fundamentally wrong. Show off, she muttered under her breath, but she couldn't stop the small, involuntary smile that tugged at the corner of her mouth. She corrected the error, then tucked the sticky note into the front cover of her notebook. She wasn't sure why she kept it. Maybe as a reminder that someone had been paying attention. Maybe as a reminder that she needed to be more careful. Or maybe for reasons she wasn't ready to examine yet. Her phone buzzed with a message from Meng Yao. Asterisk, babe, where are you? I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Asterisk. Yushi stared at the message for a long moment. In her past life, she would have dropped everything and run to her friend's side. She would have asked what was wrong, listened to the latest drama, offered advice, played her role as the supportive best friend. Not this time. She typed back. Asterisk, in the library. Studying. Talk later. Asterisk. Then she silenced her phone and walked to her favorite corner of the third-floor reading room, where the light was good and the Wi-Fi signal was strong. She had a semester to win, and she wasn't going to let anyone distract her. The first week back was a careful exercise in avoidance. Yushi developed a routine that left almost no room for the unexpected. Morning run at 6. Shower by 6:30. Breakfast in the nearly empty cafeteria by 7. Then straight to class. Lunch was eaten alone at a corner table in the library cafe, where she could review her notes while chewing on a sandwich. Afternoon classes. Evening study sessions in the third-floor reading room until the librarian kicked everyone out at 10. The routine was boring. It was predictable. It was exactly what she needed. She started mapping out her semester in a spreadsheet, color-coding each course, each assignment, each exam. The spreadsheet was a work of art, conditional formatting, pivot tables, a timeline that stretched from February to June. It was the kind of organizational system that would make most people's eyes glaze over. Yushi found it beautiful. Mengyao, predictably, was not pleased. "You're never around anymore," she complained on Wednesday evening, cornering Yushi just as she was about to leave the dorm room. Mengyao was wearing a new dress, pale blue with a cinched waist that accentuated her figure, and her hair was freshly curled. She looked like she was ready for a photo shoot, not a night of studying. "I've been busy," Yushi said, adjusting the strap of her bag. "Classes are harder this semester." "Classes?" Mengyao rolled her eyes, a gesture she had perfected over years of practice. "You used to have fun. You used to want to hang out with me. What happened?" "You happened," Yushi thought. You and your 3 boyfriends and your lies and your casual cruelty and your willingness to destroy anyone who gets in your way. But she said, "I'm just trying to focus. You know I want to apply for graduate school. That's still 2 years away. You can afford to relax a little." Mengyao stepped closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Come with me tonight. I'm meeting someone, and I really need my wingwoman." Yushi's heart rate ticked up, but she kept her expression neutral. "Meeting who?" Gu Weiran. Mingyao's smile was radiant, the kind of smile that had made boys fall for her since she was 13. "From the basketball team. He asked me out." Can you believe it? She could believe it. She had lived through it before. Gu Weiran, the campus heartthrob, tall and handsome with a smile that made girls swoon and a jump shot that made the crowd roar. He had asked Mengyao out on the Wednesday of the first week of sophomore year, and she had said yes. And then she had also continued seeing Chen Zihao, the rich second-generation kid who bought her designer bags and took her to expensive restaurants, and Su Ming, the graduate student who was tutoring her in advanced mathematics and clearly had feelings for her that went beyond academic interest. 3 relationships, 3 separate lives, all kept carefully compartmentalized, like a juggler keeping plates spinning in the air. "I can't," Yushi said. "I have a study session tomorrow morning, and I need to prep." "A study session? Since when do you do study sessions?" "Since I decided I want to win the National Accounting Excellence Competition this year." Mingyao's expression flickered, a flash of something that might have been annoyance or even jealousy. Then it was gone, replaced by the sweet, slightly pouty look she wore so well, like a mask that had been polished to perfection. "Fine. Be boring. But don't come crying to me when you burn out." Yushi almost laughed. In her past life, she had been the one saying those exact words to Mengyao, the concerned friend warning about burnout, about overwork, about the dangers of stretching yourself too thin. The irony was almost too much. "Wouldn't dream of it," she said, and slipped out the door before Mengyao could try again. The National Accounting Excellence Competition. NAEC. It was a big deal in the finance and accounting world, a national competition for undergraduate students that could open doors to graduate programs, internships, and job offers. The winners were scouted by top firms. Their names appeared in industry publications. They became legends in their own small way. In her past life, Yushi had been vaguely aware of the NAEC, but she had never seriously considered participating. She had been too busy being Mingyao's support system, too wrapped up in the drama that was slowly consuming her life. This time, she had already registered online, filling out the forms with trembling fingers and a sense of determination she hadn't felt in years. The preliminary round was in 6 weeks. The top 30 teams from the written exam would advance to the regional finals. The top 10 from each region would compete in the national championship. Yushi was going to be one of them. She had to be. She spent the next 2 hours in the library, working through practice problems and making flashcards. The third-floor reading room was her sanctuary now, quiet, well-lit, filled with the smell of old books and the soft rustle of pages turning. The windows faced east, catching the morning light, and the wooden tables were worn smooth by generations of students who had sat in the same spots, wrestling with the same concepts. At 8:47 p.m., the person in the seat diagonal from hers cleared his throat. Yushi looked up. Lu Chen was sitting there, his laptop open, a stack of reference books piled beside him in a tower that looked like it might topple at any moment. He had been there for at least an hour, she realized. She had been so focused on her work that she hadn't even noticed him arrive. Staring is rude, he said, not looking up from his screen. I wasn't staring. I was zoning out. You were staring. I counted. 14 seconds. Are you timing me? I'm efficient. He finally looked up, and there was a hint of amusement in his otherwise expressionless face. The NAEC registration form. You have it open on your screen. Yushi's hand moved instinctively to close the tab, then stopped. There was no point in hiding it. So what if I do? Nothing. Just making an observation. He returned his attention to his work. The written exam covers management accounting, financial reporting, taxation, and auditing. The taxation section tends to be the hardest because the laws change every year. Most people rely on outdated study materials. I'm aware of that. Are you? Because the 2023 edition of the National Tax Reference Guide was revised in November. If you're using the 2022 edition, you're studying the wrong rates. Yushi's jaw tightened. She was using the 2022 edition. It was the only one available in the library's reference section, and she hadn't known there was a newer version. How do you know about the 2023 edition? Lu Chen shrugged, a casual movement of his shoulders that somehow conveyed both modesty and confidence. I keep track. The digital version is available on the China Tax Bureau's public database. Free to download. He said it so casually, like it was obvious information that everyone would naturally have. But Yushi knew that it wasn't obvious. She had spent hours searching for updated materials and had come up with nothing. The government databases were notoriously difficult to navigate. Their search functions practically useless. I didn't know, she said, and the admission felt like a small defeat. Now you do. He pushed a piece of paper across the table. It had a URL written on it in the same neat handwriting as the sticky note from the first day of class. The direct link to the PDF. Don't bother with the search function. Yushi took the paper, her fingers brushing against his for the briefest moment. His hand was warm, and something electric traveled up her arm. A spark that she couldn't explain. Thanks, she said, keeping her voice neutral. Don't thank me yet. If we're both going for the NAEC, we're competitors. I'm just making sure the competition is at its hardest. Is that supposed to be intimidating? Take it however you want. He turned back to his screen, the conversation clearly over. Yushi looked at the piece of paper in her hand. The letters were neat and precise, each character perfectly formed. She had the strange urge to laugh, at the absurdity of the situation, at the unexpected kindness from someone she had assumed was her rival. Competitor or not, Lu Chen had just given her the most useful information she had received all week. And he had done it without any expectation of repayment, without any fanfare, without even looking like he wanted acknowledgement. Interesting, she thought. Very interesting. She opened her laptop and typed in the URL. The PDF downloaded in seconds. The first page listed the revised tax brackets for 2023, along with the new deduction limits and reporting requirements. Lu Chen was right. Every number was different from the 2022 edition. She spent the next hour comparing the two documents, marking up her study guides with corrections. It was tedious work, but necessary, and it kept her mind occupied, kept her from thinking about Meng Yao and her 3 boyfriends and the inevitable disaster that was waiting somewhere down the line. At 10 o'clock, the librarian announced closing time with a gentle cough and a pointed look at her watch. Yushi packed up her things, and Lu Chen did the same with synchronized efficiency. As if they had been doing this together for years. They walked out of the library together, neither speaking at first, The night air was cool against Yushi's face, carrying the faint scent of the cherry blossoms that lined the main campus path. In a few weeks, they would be in full bloom, blanketing the walkways in pale pink petals that looked like snow. "Which team are you registering with?" Lu Chen asked, breaking the silence. "I'm going solo." He looked at her, one eyebrow raised. "Solo? For NAEC. Is that a problem? Most people do teams of 3. The competition allows individuals, but it puts you at a disadvantage. The case study round requires group work. I work better alone." He considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That's fair. But if you change your mind, Team 5 is looking for a third member. Professor Zhang is the faculty advisor. Team 5, the unofficial team of the top students in the accounting department. In her past life, Yushi wouldn't have even been considered for such a spot. She had been too average, too unremarkable, too buried in someone else's shadow. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you corrected your Markov chain error. Most people don't bother checking their work when someone points out a mistake. They just get defensive or ignore it." He stopped walking and turned to face her fully. The campus lights cast shadows across his face, making his features look sharper, more defined. "You checked. And you fixed it. That tells me something about you. Maybe I'm just a good student. Maybe." He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary, and Yushi felt something shift in the air between them. "Think about it. Team 5 isn't a commitment you have to make today, but the registration deadline is next Friday." Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty courtyard. Yushi watched him go, her eyes tracing the line of his shoulders, the easy confidence in his stride. She shook her head and started walking back to the dorm. She didn't have time for distractions. Not from Zhao Mengyao, not from Lu Chen, not from anyone. But as she lay in bed that night, trying to fall asleep, she found herself thinking about the way he had looked at her when he said she had checked her work. Like he had seen something in her that no one else had noticed. Like she was worth paying attention to. "Focus," she whispered to herself in the dark. "Just focus." The word echoed in the silence of the room, and Yushi closed her eyes, willing herself to sleep. Tomorrow was another day of classes, another day of study, another day of building the future she had been given a second chance to create. But the image of Lu Chen's face stayed with her as she drifted off, a small warmth in the cold darkness of the night. By Friday, Yushi still hadn't made a decision about Team 5. She had downloaded the registration form 3 times and closed it without filling it out each time. The cursor blinked at her from the empty fields, waiting for her to commit, and each time she had found a reason to delay. The problem was that joining a team meant forming connections. It meant being accountable to other people. It meant showing up, being reliable, being vulnerable. And after everything that had happened in her past life, the idea of being vulnerable with anyone made her skin crawl. But going solo meant working 3 times as hard. It meant mastering every aspect of the competition by herself, the financial analysis, the strategic thinking, the presentation skills. It meant no one to lean on when the pressure got too intense. No one to catch the details she might miss. She was still wrestling with the decision when she walked into the business school building on Friday afternoon and ran directly into Gu Weiran. Literally, her shoulder connected with his chest, and she stumbled backward, her notebook scattering across the floor in a cascade of paper. "Sorry, I'm so sorry," she said, dropping to her knees to gather her things, her face burning with embarrassment. "Hey, no, it was my fault. I wasn't looking where I was going." Gu Weiran knelt down to help her, his movements easy and athletic. He was exactly as she remembered, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of conventionally handsome face that made girls whisper when he walked by and boys want to be his friend. He was wearing a basketball jersey under his jacket, and his hair was still damp from practice, curling slightly at the edges. He handed her a stack of papers, and their eyes met. "You're Lin Yushi, right? Mingyao's roommate." "Great," Yushi thought. Asterisk, of course he knows who I am. Of course. Asterisk, that's me. I'm Gu Weiran. I've seen you around campus. Mingyao talks about you all the time. He smiled, and it was a genuine smile, warm and open. The kind of smile that had probably charmed countless people. She says you're the smartest person in the accounting department. She's generous with her praise. I don't think she's the type to give empty compliments. He handed her the last notebook. Here, all accounted for. Thanks. An awkward silence stretched between them. Yushi knew she should walk away. She knew that any interaction with Gu Weiran was a potential landmine, a thread that could lead back to Mingyao's web of lies. Every moment she spent talking to him was a moment that someone might see, a detail that might be misconstrued, a connection that might be used against her. But she also knew that Gu Weiran was, at his core, a decent person. She remembered him from her past life, the way his face had crumbled when he found out about Mingyao's betrayals. The way he had walked around campus like a ghost for weeks afterward. He hadn't deserved what happened to him. Are you going to the basketball game next week? He asked. The final against University of Technology. It's going to be a big game. I don't usually go to games. You should come. It's going to be a good one. We've been practicing for weeks. He paused, as if considering something. I'll make sure Mengyao saves you a seat. Yushi's stomach clenched. The idea of sitting in the stands with Mengyao, pretending everything was normal, pretending she didn't know what was coming, pretending she was just a supportive friend cheering on her best friend's boyfriend, it made her feel physically ill. I'll see if I have time, she said, forcing a smile that felt brittle on her face. Good luck with the game. Thanks. Maybe I'll see you around. He walked away, and Yushi let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She watched him disappear around the corner, his broad shoulders and easy gait a testament to the kind of person he was, confident, kind, and completely unsuspecting. Gu Weiran was going to get hurt. Chen Zihao, the rich second-generation kid with the expensive gifts and the connections, was going to get hurt. Even Su Ming, the quiet graduate student who probably deserved the pain the least, was going to get hurt when he realized he was just one of three. And Mengyao, when the walls closed in, was going to burn everything down around them and try to pin the ashes on Yushi. But this time, Yushi wasn't going to be there to catch the blame. She straightened her shoulders, gathered her notebooks, and walked toward the library. There was still time left before dinner, and she had taxation problems to solve. The second week passed in a blur of classes and study sessions. Yushi threw herself into her work with an intensity that surprised even herself. She read ahead in all her courses, completed assignments days before they were due, and started preparing for the NAEC preliminary round with the dedication of someone who had nothing to lose. And she kept running into Lu Chen. It was almost comical, how often their paths crossed. He was in her intermediate financial accounting class, of course, but he also showed up at the library at the same times she did, chose study tables in the same section of the reading room, and seemed to have a sixth sense for when she was struggling with a concept. On Tuesday, he appeared at her elbow when she was frowning at a particularly difficult problem set. The depreciation calculation uses the double declining method, not straight line, he said, pointing at the relevant section of her textbook, page 142. On Wednesday, he slid a reference book across the table toward her. This has a better explanation of the equity method for investments. The library copy is checked out, but I have an extra. On Thursday, she found a sticky note on her desk when she arrived at the library. It said, asterisk, the NAEC sample paper was updated. Check the portal. Asterisk, each interaction was brief, almost casual. He never lingered, never expected thanks, never acted like he was doing her a favor. He just helped, quietly, consistently, without fanfare. It was disorienting. Yushi wasn't used to people helping her without wanting something in return. In her past life, every kindness had come with strings attached. Every favor had been a transaction. But Lu Chen seemed to operate on a different set of rules entirely. On Saturday morning, she finally made a decision. She opened the Team 5 registration form and filled it out. The study group met for the first time on Saturday afternoon in room 301 of the business school building. Yushi arrived early, her nerves buzzing beneath her calm exterior. The room was a standard seminar space, with a long wooden table in the center and a whiteboard covering most of the front wall. She took a seat near the middle, pulling out her notebook and a pen. One by one, the other members arrived. There were 5 of them in total, 3 girls and 2 boys. All of them clearly serious students based on the textbooks and laptops they carried. They introduced themselves with brief nods and careful smiles, the way people did when they were sizing each other up. Lu Chen arrived last, carrying a stack of printed materials that he distributed around the table. "Welcome to the first official Team 5 study session," he said, his voice carrying the same calm authority he had in class. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lu Chen. I'll be coordinating our preparation for the NAEC and other academic competitions." He went around the table, asking each person to introduce themselves and share their strengths and weaknesses. When it was Yushi's turn, she said, "Lin Yushi. I'm good at conceptual frameworks and written analysis. I need to work on speed for quantitative sections." Lu Chen made a note on his tablet. "Good to know. We'll structure our sessions to cover both areas." The session lasted 2 hours, covering the structure of the NAEC written exam, common pitfalls, and a strategy for tackling the case study section. Lu Chen led most of the discussion, but he wasn't a lecturer. He asked questions, challenged assumptions, pushed people to think more deeply. Yushi found herself engaged in a way she hadn't been in weeks. These were people who cared about the same things she cared about, who spoke the same language of balance sheets and internal rate of return and deferred tax assets. It was refreshing, like finding a pocket of air in a drowning world. At one point, during a debate about the correct treatment of operating leases under the new accounting standards, Lu Chen turned to her. "Yushi, what's your take?" She hadn't expected to be called on. She paused, gathering her thoughts. The new standard eliminates the distinction between operating and finance leases for lessees. All leases are now recorded as right-of-use assets and lease liabilities. Which creates what problem? Increased debt ratios on balance sheets. Companies that relied on operating leases to keep debt off their books will see their leverage ratios spike. It affects loan covenants, investor perceptions, and credit ratings. Good. He nodded. And there was something in his eyes, approval, maybe, or respect. That's exactly the kind of analysis the case study judges look for. Most people just memorize the standard. You're thinking about the implications. Something warm bloomed in Yushi's chest. She pushed it down quickly, refusing to let it grow. The study session ended at 9, and people packed up their things, chatting and laughing. Yushi lingered, not in a hurry to return to the dorm room where Meng Yao might or might not be waiting. Lu Chen was erasing the whiteboard, his movements methodical. "You're good at this," she said, "at erasing whiteboards. It's a skill I've developed over many years." "At teaching." He paused, the eraser suspended mid-stroke. "I'm not teaching. I'm just sharing what I know." "Same thing." "Not the same." He turned to face her. "Teaching implies a hierarchy. I'm not above anyone in this room. I just started preparing earlier. That's all. Humility. That's rare. Honesty. That's rarer still." Their eyes met, and Yushi felt that strange sense of recognition again, like she was looking at someone who understood things without needing them to be explained, someone who operated on the same wavelength. "The study group is meeting every Saturday," he said. "You're welcome to keep coming. I'll think about it." "Do that." He picked up his bag. "And Yushi." "What?" "Your reasoning on the lease standard was correct. But you should also consider the cash flow statement implications. Operating lease payments were previously classified as operating cash flows. Under the new standard, the principal portion is classified as financing. It changes the operating cash flow metric significantly." Yushi's mind raced through the implications. Which means companies that look cash-rich under the old classification might look cash-poor under the new one. Exactly. He smiled, a real smile. Small but genuine. The first she had seen from him. "See you around." He left, and Yushi stood alone in the empty classroom, the echo of his words hanging in the air. That night, she dreamed of numbers. Balance sheets stretched to infinity. Each one perfectly balanced. Each one telling a story that made sense. And in the dream, someone was standing beside her, pointing out details she had missed, showing her things she hadn't seen. When she woke up, she couldn't remember his face, but she remembered the feeling of not being alone. The third week brought rain, not the gentle spring drizzle that poets wrote about, but a relentless downpour that turned the campus pathways into rivers and left everyone damp and irritable. The gutters overflowed. The grass turned to mud, and students dashed between buildings with backpacks held over their heads. Yushi had to buy a new umbrella from the campus convenience store after her old one broke in the wind, the metal ribs snapping like twigs. She arrived at intermediate financial accounting soaked from the knees down, her shoes squelching with every step. Lu Chen was already in his seat, looking as dry and composed as ever. He had an umbrella, she noticed, a serious-looking black one with a wooden handle and a sturdy frame that had clearly survived many storms. "You're wet," he observed. "Perceptive. You should become a detective. There's a drying station in the women's restroom on the second floor. It's not very well known, but it usually works. Thanks." She shook the worst of the water from her hair and sat down, water dripping from her sleeves onto the desk. "I'll survive." Professor Zhang started the lecture promptly, discussing the nuances of earnings per share calculations. Yushi took notes, her fingers slightly cold and clumsy, the pen slipping in her grip. But she forced herself to focus, pushing through the discomfort. Halfway through the lecture, a folded piece of paper slid across the desk. She opened it under her notebook, shielding the movement from the professor's view. Inside, in Lu Chen's neat handwriting, was a single line. Asterisk, your hands are shaking. Take a break. I'll share my notes. Asterisk, Yushi looked down at her hands. They weren't shaking. She looked again. Actually, they were. Just slightly. A fine tremor that she hadn't noticed in the intensity of her focus. She looked at him. He was facing forward, taking notes as if he hadn't just noticed a detail she herself had missed. She wrote back. Asterisk, I'm fine. Asterisk, the note returned. Asterisk, denial is the first stage. Asterisk, she suppressed a laugh. It came out as a snort, and the girl in front of her turned around with a curious look. Yushi waved her off, burying her face in her notebook. At the break, Yushi did go to the restroom and found the mysterious drying station. It was essentially a high-powered hand dryer attached to the wall at ankle height, clearly installed for exactly this purpose. She stood in front of it for a full minute, letting the warm air dry her shoes and socks, feeling the heat seep into her cold feet. When she came back to the classroom, there was a paper cup of hot tea on her desk. Her expression must have been something, because Lu Chen said, without looking at her, "The machine in the hallway. 2 yuan. You can pay me back. I didn't ask for this." "You didn't have to." She wrapped her hands around the warm cup, feeling the heat seep into her fingers. The tea was too sweet and slightly bland, the kind of instant powder mix that was popular in campus vending machines. It was also the kindest thing anyone had done for her since she had woken up in this timeline. "Thanks," she said, and she meant it. "Don't mention it. I'd say the same for anyone who looked like they might faint during an EPS calculation." "I wasn't going to faint." "You looked like you might faint." "I never faint." "Noted." He turned back to his textbook, but there was a ghost of amusement in his expression, a curve at the corner of his mouth that hadn't been there before. "Never faints. Very tough." "Got it." Yushi took a sip of the tea and tried very hard not to smile. She failed. That afternoon, the rain had stopped, leaving behind a washed-clean sky and puddles that reflected the gray clouds like mirrors. The air was fresh and cool, carrying the earthy smell of wet pavement and damp grass. Yushi was on her way to the library when her phone rang. Meng Yao. She almost didn't answer. Every instinct told her to let it go to voicemail, to maintain the careful distance she had been cultivating. But she knew that ignoring calls would only make Meng Yao more suspicious, would invite the kind of scrutiny she didn't need. "Hello, Yushi." Meng Yao's voice was bright, almost manic, with an edge of desperation that cut through the cheerfulness. "Where are you?" "Walking to the library." "Cancel that. I need you. Emergency." Yushi's steps slowed. "What kind of emergency?" "A real one. I'm at the cafe near the East Gate. You know the one. Please. Yushi. I really need you right now." There was something in Ming Yao's voice that gave Yushi pause. Not quite fear, but close. A crack in the perfect facade. A glimpse of the chaos underneath. In her past life, she would have run. She would have dropped everything and sprinted to the cafe. her heart pounding with concern for her best friend. She would have arrived breathless and anxious, ready to solve whatever problem Meng Yao had created. This time, she hesitated. For a long moment, she stood in the middle of the path, students flowing around her like water around a stone. And in that hesitation, she made a choice. "Send me your location," she said. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. She told herself she was being strategic. She needed to maintain the appearance of normalcy, of friendship. If she cut Meng Yao off completely, it would look suspicious. It would invite questions. It would put Yushi in the center of the drama instead of on the sidelines where she wanted to be. Better to show up. Better to be seen. Better to play the role of the slightly distant but still loyal friend. So that when the collapse came, no one could say she had abandoned Meng Yao. That was the rationalization. She wasn't sure she believed it. The cafe was a small, cozy place tucked between a used bookstore and a convenience store, with a faded sign that read, "Read and Brew," in curling script. The walls were lined with mismatched shelves filled with second-hand books, romance novels next to philosophy texts, science fiction next to cookbooks, and the air smelled of coffee and vanilla and paper. Yushi found Meng Yao at a table in the back corner, her face pale beneath her carefully applied makeup, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. She looked up when Yushi approached, and there was genuine relief in her eyes. "You came," she said, her voice small. "I said I would." Yushi sat down across from her. "What's wrong?" Meng Yao bit her lip, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I don't know how to say this." "Just say it." "Qin Zihao asked me to go to his family's villa next weekend." Yushi waited. "And that's a problem because I already promised Gu Weiran I'd go to his basketball game that Saturday. And Su Ming wants me to help him with a research project that weekend too. 3 commitments, all on the same weekend." Yushi kept her face neutral, showing nothing of the thoughts racing through her mind. "Can't you reschedule one of them?" "That's the problem. I can't figure out how. Qin Zihao's parents are going to be at the villa, and he really wants me to meet them. Gu Weiran's game is the biggest of the season, and he told me he's nervous and needs me there for support. And Su Ming's project deadline is Monday morning, so we'd have to work on it over the weekend." Her voice rose in pitch, the words tumbling out faster and faster. "What am I supposed to do? I can't be in 3 places at once." In her past life, Yushi would have helped her figure out a scheme. She would have suggested a fabricated family emergency, offered to cover for her, crafted an elaborate alibi complete with fake text messages and corroborating witnesses. "I don't know," Yushi said. "It's your life. You have to decide what's most important." Meng Yao stared at her. "That's it. Decide what's most important. What else do you want me to say?" "I want you to help me." Meng Yao's voice was loud enough that a few heads turned. She lowered it, leaning in across the table. "You're supposed to be my best friend. Best friends help each other. That's what we do. I'm not the one who made 3 commitments for the same weekend." The words came out before Yushi could stop them. Ming Yao's face went blank, all expression draining away like water from a sink. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. I'm just saying that maybe you need to be more realistic about what you can handle. You can't be everything to everyone." "You're judging me." "I'm not judging you, Meng Yao. I'm saying that I can't solve this for you. I can't make the choice for you. This is something you have to figure out on your own." Ming Yao's expression shifted, the vulnerability disappearing behind something harder, colder. "You've changed, Yushi. You used to understand me. You used to be there for me. Maybe I've just started understanding myself." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and final. Meng Yao looked at her like she was seeing a stranger, someone who wore her best friend's face but didn't have her best friend's heart. "Fine," she said, standing up abruptly. The chair scraped against the floor with a harsh sound. "I'll figure it out myself. Thanks for nothing." She grabbed her bag and walked out, her heels clicking against the tile floor, leaving her untouched coffee on the table. Yushi watched her go, the cafe door swinging shut behind her. She sat there for a long time, staring at the cold coffee, feeling something between relief and dread. She had just drawn a line, a small one, but a real one. She had refused to be drawn into Ming Yao's web of lies. had refused to become an accomplice in her deception. The question was whether it would be enough to keep her out of the blast radius when everything exploded. The fourth week of the semester brought the first real test. Intermediate financial accounting had its first midterm on Friday, and the entire department seemed to be holding its collective breath. The library was packed every evening. The study rooms booked solid. The cafe tables covered in open textbooks and scattered notes. Yushi approached the exam with the same methodical preparation she had applied to everything else that semester. She reviewed her notes, worked through practice problems, and met with the Team 5 study group for a marathon review session on Wednesday night. The exam itself was brutal. 3 hours, 5 essay questions, and a complex case study that required analyzing a fictional company's financial statements and identifying areas of concern. Yushi wrote until her hand cramped, filled page after page with analysis and calculations, and turned in her exam with 5 minutes to spare. When the results came out on Monday, she was sitting in the library, pretending to study while refreshing the grade portal every 30 seconds. The page loaded. Her score, 94 out of 100. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. A 94. That was an A, comfortably in the top range. It wasn't the highest score in the class. She was sure Lu Chen had gotten at least a 97, but it was good. It was solid. It was proof that her strategy was working. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lu Chen. *95. You're getting closer. She smiled despite herself. *94. And I wasn't trying to beat you. You should be. Competition makes us both better. Is that your way of saying you're worried? It's my way of saying I'm paying attention. She stared at the message, her heart doing something strange in her chest. She typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on. Good. I'll keep you on your toes. Looking forward to it. The midterm results had another effect. They caught Meng Yao's attention. 94%. Meng Yao said, reading over Yushi's shoulder. She had appeared in the dorm room while Yushi was reviewing her graded exam. Her footsteps silent on the tile floor. Since when are you this good at accounting? Since I started studying, Yushi said, not looking up. You used to get 80s. Maybe 85 if you really tried. I've been putting in more effort this semester. Meng Yao sat down on her bed, her eyes fixed on Yushi with an unreadable expression. You've been putting in more effort at a lot of things. Studying, competitions, making new friends. I wouldn't say I'm making new friends. That guy Lu Chen, I've heard about him. People say you two are always together. We have classes together, and we're on the same competition team. That's not the same as being always together. It's what people are saying. People say a lot of things. Yushi finally looked up, meeting Meng Yao's gaze. Why does it matter to you? Meng Yao's expression flickered. It doesn't. I'm just looking out for you. Guys like him, the smart, serious type, they can be manipulative. They make you think they care about you, but really they just want to use you. Yushi almost laughed. The irony was so thick she could taste it. Here was Meng Yao, who was currently manipulating 3 different men, warning Yushi about being manipulated. I can take care of myself, Yushi said. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying. Yushi closed her exam booklet and stood up. But I'm fine. Really. You don't need to worry about me. She walked out of the room before Meng Yao could respond, her heart pounding. The conversation had felt like a test. Meng Yao was probing, trying to figure out where Yushi's loyalties lay, trying to assess whether she was still a useful ally. And Yushi had passed, by being neutral, by not giving anything away. But she knew it wouldn't be the last time. Meng Yao was getting desperate. The walls were closing in on her, and desperate people did desperate things. The national competition loomed closer. The NAEC preliminary round was scheduled for the last Saturday of March, and Yushi's preparation had reached a fever pitch. She spent every available moment studying, reviewing past papers, memorizing tax rates, practicing case analyses. The Team 5 study sessions had become more intense, with Lu Chen running mock exams and drilling everyone on their weak points. I've noticed something, Lu Chen said one evening, as they were packing up after a particularly grueling session. What? You're good at this. Really good. But you hold back. Yushi paused, her notebook half in her bag. What do you mean? In the mock exams, you always finish with time to spare. You get the answers right, but you don't push yourself to go deeper. It's like you're satisfied with being good enough, even though you could be excellent. She considered his words. He wasn't wrong. In her past life, she had learned to make herself small, to not stand out, to blend in. Being excellent had attracted attention, and attention had been dangerous. This is a competition. Lu Qin continued. If you want to win, you can't just be good. You have to be exceptional. I know. Do you? Because sometimes I wonder if you're really trying, or if you're just going through the motions. His words stung, partly because they were true. Yushi had been playing it safe, keeping her head down, doing enough to succeed but not enough to shine. She had been so focused on avoiding the disasters of her past life that she had forgotten how to reach for greatness. You're right, she said quietly. I've been holding back. Why? Because the last time I stood out, I got destroyed. She wanted to say. Because being visible made me a target. Because I learned the hard way that excellence comes with a price. But she couldn't say any of that. So she said, I'm not sure, but I'll stop. Good. He nodded, satisfied. Because I want to compete against the real you. Not the version that's afraid to win. The real her. The version that wasn't afraid to win. Yushi didn't know if that person still existed, but she was willing to find out. The week before the NAEC preliminary round, Yushi received a phone call from her mother. It was unexpected. In her past life, the calls had become less frequent over time, strained by distance and unspoken disappointments. But in this timeline, her mother's voice was warm and familiar, carrying the same cadence she remembered from childhood. Yushi, how are you? Is everything okay? I'm fine. Mom, everything's fine. You sound busy. Are you eating properly? Getting enough sleep? I'm taking care of myself. Yushi leaned against the wall of the dorm hallway. The phone pressed to her ear. I have a big competition coming up. The National Accounting Excellence Competition. Accounting. I thought you were studying general business. I changed my focus. Well, that's wonderful. Your father and I are very proud of you. Yushi's throat tightened. In her past life, she hadn't heard those words in years. They had been replaced by careful questions, by the silence of people who didn't know how to talk about the shame their daughter had brought upon the family. Thanks, Mom. I'll do my best. I know you will. You've always been a hard worker. Not always. Yushi thought. But I am now. They talked for a few more minutes, about the weather and relatives and the small details of life in her hometown. When Yushi hung up, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Her parents believed in her. They were proud of her. And this time, she was going to make sure they stayed that way. The preliminary round of the NAEC was held on a gray Saturday in late March. The venue was the Jindu University Conference Center, a modern building with glass walls and minimalist furniture that made Yushi feel like she was walking into a corporate headquarters rather than an exam hall. The lobby was filled with students from different universities, all carrying the same nervous energy, all clutching pencils and calculators like lifelines. Yushi found her assigned seat in exam hall B, a desk near the middle of the room. She set down her bag, arranged her supplies, ID, calculator, 2 pens, a bottle of water, and took a deep breath. 2 rows ahead and 1 seat to the left, she saw a familiar back. Lu Qin was there. Of course he was. He turned, as if sensing her gaze, and their eyes met. He gave a small nod, a gesture of acknowledgement that felt almost intimate in the charged atmosphere of the exam hall. Yushi nodded back. Then the proctor began reading the instructions, and she turned her attention to the paper in front of her. The exam was 3 hours long. It covered everything she had studied and a few things she hadn't. The multiple-choice section tested her knowledge of tax rates and reporting standards. The case study required her to analyze a company's financial statements and identify potential fraud indicators. The essay section asked her to discuss the ethical implications of aggressive revenue recognition. Yushi wrote steadily, her hand moving across the page with practiced efficiency. The world narrowed to the questions in front of her. the calculations that needed to be made, the analysis that needed to be constructed. By the time the proctor called time, her hand was cramping and her neck was stiff, but she felt good. Not confident, she knew better than to assume anything in a competition this competitive, but satisfied that she had done her best. She packed up her things and walked out into the afternoon light. The clouds had cleared, and the sun was bright, making her squint. Yushi. She turned. Lu Chen was walking toward her, his bag slung over one shoulder. How did you find it? Difficult. But fair. That's diplomatic. He fell into step beside her. The ESG section, did you manage the question on scenario analysis? I think so. I used the TCFD framework to structure my answer. Good. That's what I did too. They walked in silence for a few moments, the sound of their footsteps echoing on the concrete path. The campus was quiet, most students still in their exam halls. Nervous about the results? He asked. A little, but I've done what I can. The rest is out of my hands. That's a healthy attitude. It's the only attitude that makes sense. Worrying doesn't change the outcome. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You're different than I expected. Different how? I'm not sure yet. But different. He stopped walking. There's a ramen place near the East Gate. The owner is from Hokkaido. It's the closest thing to real Japanese ramen in this city. Is this an invitation? It's a suggestion. For someone who just spent 3 hours doing mental gymnastics and might need a meal. She should say no. She should go back to the library and review her answers while they were still fresh in her mind. She should maintain her distance, preserve her carefully constructed walls. But she was tired, and hungry, and the idea of sitting alone in her usual corner of the library, eating a sad sandwich while reviewing exam answers, felt suddenly unbearable. Fine, she said, but you're paying. It's your suggestion. That was always the assumption. The ramen place was exactly as he had described, small and unassuming, with a handwritten menu in Japanese and Chinese posted on the wall and only 6 seats at the counter. The owner, an older man with kind eyes and a heavy accent, greeted Lu Chen like an old friend. The usual? He asked. 2 of the usual. Please. They sat at the counter, watching the owner work. He moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been making the same dish for decades. His hands sure and steady. The broth bubbled in large pots, filling the air with a rich, savory aroma that made Yushi's stomach growl. You come here often? She asked. Once a week. It's my reward for surviving. I can see why. The ramen arrived in steaming bowls, rich pork broth, hand-pulled noodles, slices of chashu, a soft-boiled egg cut in half, and a sprinkle of green onions. It was beautiful, arranged with the care of someone who took pride in their work. Yushi took a spoonful of the broth and closed her eyes. The flavor was deep and complex, layers of umami that spread across her tongue. This is incredible. Told you. They ate in comfortable silence. The only sounds the slurping of noodles and the occasional clink of chopsticks against ceramic. It was the most relaxed Yushi had felt since waking up in this timeline. Halfway through the meal, her phone buzzed. A message from Mengyao. Asterisk, can you come back to the room? I need to talk to you. It's important. Asterisk, Yushi stared at the screen. The timing was almost comical. Of course Mengyao would reach out now, in the middle of the first genuinely pleasant moment Yushi had experienced in weeks. Bad news? Lu Chen asked. No, just someone who wants my attention. You don't seem happy about it. I'm not. She put the phone face down on the counter. It can wait. He didn't press. He just nodded once and returned to his ramen. And Yushi let herself enjoy the rest of the meal, pushing Mengyao and her demands to the back of her mind. She would deal with it later. For now, she had earned this. The NAEC preliminary results came out on Wednesday. Yushi checked her phone between classes, her heart pounding as she navigated to the results portal. The page loaded slowly, spinning for what felt like an eternity before displaying the information. NAEC preliminary round results. Candidate ID JDU 2024-0872 ***. Score 188/200 ***. Ranking. Second place, Jindu University Region ***. Second place, She read the number 3 times, making sure she hadn't misread. 188 out of 200. Second place in the entire region. She had made it. She had advanced to the regional finals. Her hands were shaking as she closed the browser. She took a deep breath, then another, trying to process the rush of emotions, relief, pride, excitement, and something that felt almost like joy. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lu Chin. Congratulations. First place was me. She laughed out loud, drawing curious looks from the students passing by in the hallway. Show off. She typed back. But seriously. Congratulations. We both made it. The hard part is next. Regional finals are in 6 weeks. The format is completely different, team-based case competition. I know. I've already started preparing. Good. Meet me at the library at 6. I have an idea. For the competition. For both of us. She stared at the message, trying to decode its meaning. But Lu Chin was as cryptic as ever, and she knew better than to expect clarification. She went to the library at 6. He was in their usual spot on the 3rd floor, a stack of books and a laptop occupying the table in front of him. He looked up when she approached, and there was a lightness in his expression that she hadn't seen before. Second place, he said. That's impressive. First place is more impressive. First place is expected. Second place is surprising. Surprise is more interesting. Are you saying I surprised you? I'm saying that when I first saw you in intermediate financial accounting, I didn't think you'd be the person sitting across from me right now. She sat down, unsure if that was a compliment or an insult. What did you think? I thought you were someone who didn't care. You seemed distracted, like your mind was somewhere else. It was, she thought. In the future, in the past, anywhere but here. I was going through some things, she said. And now I'm here. She met his eyes, fully. He held her gaze for a moment, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement, an understanding that didn't need to be spoken aloud. Good, he said, because I have a proposal. For the competition. For both of us. He pulled out a folder and spread its contents across the table. Documents, spreadsheets, handwritten notes, materials that he had clearly been compiling for days. The regional finals require teams of 2 to 3 people. The case study is announced 2 weeks before the competition, and you have 72 hours to prepare a presentation. I've been analyzing previous year's cases, and the common thread is that they require diverse expertise, financial analysis, strategic thinking, and presentation skills. I'm aware of the format. What I'm proposing is that we form a team. You and me. Yushi's eyebrows rose. A team. A 2-person team. We each bring different strengths to the table. I'm better at quantitative analysis and financial modeling. You're better at conceptual frameworks and presentation structure. Together, we'd be stronger than either of us alone. You've thought about this. I've thought about a lot of things, including you. The last words were spoken so casually that it took Yushi a moment to process them. When she did, her heart skipped a beat. She considered the proposal. It made sense. Logically, a 2-person team with complementary skills had a better chance than individual competitors trying to cover all bases. But teaming up with Lu Chin meant spending more time together, relying on each other, being vulnerable. We'd need to register within the week, he continued. The team registration deadline is Friday. That's 2 days away, which is why I'm bringing it up now. Yushi looked at the materials spread across the table. Previous year's case studies, analysis frameworks, presentation templates. He had prepared everything, thought through everything, anticipated every objection. Why me? She asked. There are other people in the study group who are just as qualified. People you've known longer. People you trust more. They don't have your analytical ability, and they don't have your drive. You barely know me. I know enough. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with those sharp, perceptive eyes. There's something about you, Yushi. Something that makes me think you're not just here to pass an exam or win a competition. You're here to prove something. Her heart stopped. And what would I be proving? I don't know. But I'd like to find out. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Yushi felt like she was standing at the edge of something, a precipice. A choice that would change the trajectory of her life. If she said yes, she would be partnering with Lu Chen. She would be committing to weeks of intense collaboration, of late nights and shared pressure, of depending on someone else. She would be opening a door that she had worked hard to keep closed. But if she said no, she would be alone. And she had been alone for long enough. Fine, she said, I'll do it. Lu Chen's expression didn't change. But something in his eyes softened. A tension in his shoulders that she hadn't noticed before seemed to release. Good. I'll prepare the registration forms. But I have conditions. What conditions? We share the work equally. No one person does more than the other. Agreed. We practice presentations together. I don't want to be caught off guard. Reasonable. And, she paused, searching for the right words. If either of us feels like this isn't working, we can walk away. No hard feelings. Also agreed. He extended his hand across the table. Partners. She took his hand. His grip was firm, his palm warm against hers. The contact sent a current through her skin. Partners. The collaboration with Lu Chen transformed Yushi's approach to the competition. They established a rhythm almost immediately, falling into complementary roles as naturally as if they had been working together for years. Mornings were for individual study, each person working through their own materials, building their own knowledge base. Afternoons were for joint analysis, working through case studies together, debating approaches and methodologies. Evenings were for synthesis, consolidating what they had learned and planning the next day's work. We need to be ready for anything, Lu Chen said during one of their early sessions. The regional finals are unpredictable. They could throw any kind of case at us. Then we need to be generalists, strong in every area, not just our specialties. That's inefficient. It's better to have deep expertise in complementary areas and trust each other to cover the gaps. But what if the case focuses on an area neither of us is strong in? Then we improvise. He said it with such confidence that Yushi almost believed it was that simple. They argued sometimes. About methodology. About the best approach to a particular problem. About the allocation of work. But the arguments were productive, pushing them to think more deeply, to defend their positions, to arrive at better solutions together. Yushi had never worked with anyone like this before. In her past life, she had been the helper, the supporter, the one who made things easier for other people. She had never had a true partner, someone who challenged her, pushed her, expected her to be better. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. You're overcomplicating the cash flow analysis, Lu Chen said one evening, pointing at her spreadsheet. You have 3 different scenarios here. The judges will only care about the base case. The competition judges want to see that we've considered multiple scenarios. It demonstrates thoroughness. Or it demonstrates that we can't make a decision. That's a valid consideration. It's a waste of time. He looked at her, his expression intense. We have 72 hours when the case drops. We need to be efficient. That means focusing on the analysis that matters most. And what matters most? Telling a compelling story. The numbers are meaningless if you can't weave them into a narrative that makes sense. Yushi sat back, considering his words. That's surprisingly philosophical for someone who lives in spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are just stories with numbers. She laughed, a genuine laugh. Surprised out of her. Did you come up with that yourself? It's written on a poster in the accounting department office. But I've adopted it as my personal motto. That's a good motto. Their eyes met across the table. And Yushi felt the familiar flutter in her chest. She had been feeling it more often lately, in the way he leaned in when she was explaining a concept, in the way his knee sometimes brushed against hers under the table, in the way he remembered small details about her preferences and mentioned them casually, as if they mattered. She didn't know what to do with these feelings. They were inconvenient, distracting, and entirely unwelcome, but they were there, growing like ivy through the cracks in her carefully constructed walls. What are you thinking? He asked. Nothing. You're a terrible liar. I'm not lying. I'm just not ready to share. He nodded, accepting her answer without pushing. Fair enough. But when you are ready, I'm a good listener. The simplicity of the offer caught her off guard. She looked down at her spreadsheet. at the cells filled with numbers that told a story, and wondered what story she was telling with her own life. While Yushi's academic life was flourishing, Mingyao's personal life was collapsing. The cracks had started to show in the 5th week of the semester. Gu Weiran had heard rumors. Someone had seen Mingyao at a restaurant with a man who wasn't him. He had confronted her, and she had denied everything, her tears and protestations convincing enough to make him back down. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Qin Zihao was next. He had a friend who worked at a hotel where Mingyao had been seen checking in with someone who matched Su Ming's description. The friend had mentioned it casually, not realizing the implications. Qin Zihao had made some calls. Su Ming was the last to know. He found out when he walked into a cafe and saw Mingyao sitting with Gu Weiran, their heads bent together, her hand on his arm. The intimacy of the gesture had been unmistakable. The confrontations happened in quick succession, each one more public and more devastating than the last. Gu Weiran had shouted. Qin Zihao had been cold and cutting. Su Ming had simply walked away without a word, his silence more damning than any accusation. Within a week, all 3 relationships were over, and Mingyao was a pariah. The campus gossip machine went into overdrive. Everyone knew someone who had heard about Zhao Mingyao and her 3 boyfriends. The story grew with each retelling, gaining that may or may not have been true, but the core remained the same. Mingyao had been playing 3 men at once, and she had been caught. Yushi watched from a careful distance, feeling the shape of the drama without being touched by it. In her past life, she would have been at the center of the storm, blamed and shamed and destroyed. This time, she was standing on the shore, watching the waves crash. But she knew the storm wasn't over yet. In her past life, the social ostracism had been the catalyst for Mingyao's final, desperate act. Cornered and friendless, with nothing left to lose, she had turned on the person who knew all her secrets. This time, Yushi was ready. The confrontation came on a Thursday evening, exactly as it had in Yushi's past life. She was walking back from a late study session with Lu Qin when Mingyao stepped out from behind a tree on the path to the dormitory. The lighting was poor, and Yushi almost didn't recognize her at first. She looked so different from the polished, perfect girl who had walked into their dorm room on the first day of the semester. Her hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her face was pale, free of makeup, showing dark circles under her eyes that makeup had been hiding. She was wearing an old sweatshirt and sweatpants, completely unlike her usual fashionable attire. Yushi stopped. Mingyao, you look terrible. I know, I feel terrible. She laughed, and the sound was hollow, devoid of humor. My life is ruined. In case you haven't heard, I've heard. Everyone's heard. That's the problem. Mingyao took a step closer, and Yushi caught the smell of alcohol on her breath. You knew this would happen, didn't you? You knew, and you didn't warn me. You didn't help me. I didn't know anything. Bullshit. The word was sharp, accusatory. You've been distant all semester. You stopped asking about my relationships. You stopped being interested. You knew I was heading for a crash, and you just watched it happen. Yushi kept her expression neutral. Her hands were steady, her voice calm. She had prepared for this moment. In your version of events, what exactly did I do? Did I make you date 3 people? Did I force you to lie to them? You could have stopped me. I could have tried, but you wouldn't have listened. You don't know that. I do know that. Yushi's voice was quiet but firm. I know you. Mingyao. I've known you for 2 years. You don't listen to anyone. You do what you want, and you expect everyone else to clean up the mess. Mingyao's face crumpled. So this is my fault. You're saying I deserve what happened. I'm saying that you made choices, and now you're facing the consequences of those choices. I can't save you from that. You've changed. Mingyao's voice dropped to a whisper. You're cold now. Hard. The Yushi I knew would never have let this happen. Maybe the Yushi you knew wasn't real. Maybe she was just who you needed her to be. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Mingyao stared at her, tears streaming down her face. If you say anything about me to anyone, she said, her voice taking on a new edge, I'll make sure you regret it. I won't say anything. I have nothing to say. Good. Mingyao turned and walked away. her footsteps unsteady on the path. Yushi watched her go, feeling the weight of the conversation settle on her shoulders. She had held her ground. She had refused to be drawn into the blame game. But the threat in Mingyao's final words hung in the air like smoke. She knew what was coming next. In her past life, it had been the same, the desperation, the threats, the eventual attempt to drag Yushi down with her. But this time, Yushi was ready. The investigation came 3 days later. Yushi was in the library, working through a practice case study with Lu Chen, when she received a call from the Student Affairs Office. The administrator's voice was professional, neutral, giving nothing away. Ms. Lin, we need to speak with you regarding some allegations that have been raised against you. Can you come to room 302 of the administration building at 2:00 p.m. today? Of course, Yushi said, her voice steady. I'll be there. She hung up and looked at Lu Chen, who was watching her with concern. What was that about? The Student Affairs Office. They want to talk to me about some allegations. Allegations? What allegations? I'm not sure. She closed her laptop. But I think I know who's behind them. Is it Zhao Mengyao? Yushi looked at him, surprised. How do you know about her? I know things. I pay attention. His expression was serious. Do you want me to come with you? No. I need to handle this myself. Are you sure? I'm sure. She walked to the administration building with her head held high, carrying a folder of evidence she had prepared weeks ago. Screenshots of text messages showing her refusing to cover for Mengyao. Testimonies from classmates who had seen her studying alone. Records of her library checkouts and study group attendance. The competition results that proved where her focus had been. The room was the same as she remembered from her past life, a sterile conference space with a long table, uncomfortable chairs, and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly sick. 3 people were waiting for her. The student affairs director, a stern woman in her 50s, the department head for accounting, Professor Liu, and Mingyao's father, a heavy-set man with angry eyes and a red face. Mengyao herself was not present. Ms. Lin, the director said, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat. Yushi sat down, placing her folder on the table in front of her. We're here to discuss some serious allegations that have been raised against you. The director continued. Zhao Mengyao has claimed that you were instrumental in orchestrating her relationships. She says you encouraged her to date multiple people, provided cover stories, and actively participated in the deception. That's not true. Can you prove that? Yushi opened her folder. Yes. I have evidence that I was not involved. Text messages where I refused to help Mengyao with her scheduling conflicts. Records showing I was in the library or in class during the times she claims I was helping her. Testimonies from classmates who observed that I distanced myself from her early in the semester. She laid everything out on the table, item by item. The director and Professor Liu examined the documents carefully, their expressions unreadable. These text messages, the director said, picking up a printout, they show you saying you can't help and it's your life, but they don't show you actively discouraging her behavior. I did discourage her. I told her she was making a mistake, but she didn't want to hear it. You can ask the other students in our study group. I talked to them about it at the time. And you have witnesses who can confirm your whereabouts. Multiple, including Lu Chen, my competition partner. We spent most of our time together preparing for the NAEC. He can confirm that I was not involved in any scheme. The director and Professor Liu exchanged a look. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement, a decision. Your competition win has been noted, Professor Liu said, her voice softening slightly. It speaks well of your character and dedication. Mingyao's father spoke up, his voice rough with emotion. My daughter is suffering. Her reputation is destroyed. Her future is ruined. And you're telling me this girl is completely innocent. Mr. Zhao, we understand your concern. The director's voice was calm, measured, but the evidence Ms. Lin has presented is credible. We will, of course, conduct a full investigation. But at this preliminary stage, there is no reason to believe she was involved in any wrongdoing. You're protecting her because she won a trophy. We're following the evidence. Mr. Zhao, that's all we ever do. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, with Yushi answering questions about her relationship with Meng Yao, her knowledge of the situation, and her actions throughout the semester. She answered each question calmly, her voice steady, her story consistent. When it was over, the director dismissed her with a warning to remain available for follow-up questions. Yushi walked out of the building feeling as though she had just survived a battle. The sun was bright, the air was warm, and she was still standing. She had faced the exact scenario that had destroyed her in her past life, and she had won. Lu Chen was waiting for her outside, sitting on a bench near the entrance. He stood up when he saw her. "How did it go?" "I think it went well. They have evidence that I wasn't involved." "Good." He fell into step beside her. "I was worried." "So was I. But I had prepared for this." "You prepared for exactly this situation." "I prepared for everything." She looked at him, and for a moment, she considered telling him the truth about her past life, about Meng Yao, about the second chance she had been given, but the words wouldn't come. Some secrets were too heavy to share. "Let's go get some ramen," she said instead. "I think I've earned it." He smiled. "I think you have." The investigation concluded in mid-June. The verdict was clear. No evidence of wrongdoing on Yushi's part. She was exonerated completely. Her reputation intact. Her academic record unblemished. Meng Yao, on the other hand, faced serious consequences. The university placed her on academic probation and required her to attend mandatory counseling sessions. Her father, humiliated by the scandal, withdrew her from the university at the end of the semester. She transferred to a smaller, less competitive school in their home province, a quiet exit that allowed the campus to move on from the drama. Yushi heard the news through the campus grapevine, passed from classmate to classmate in hushed whispers. She felt a distant pang of sadness, not for Meng Yao herself, but for the friendship they had once shared, for the laughter and the secrets and the dreams they had built together. All of it now ash. She allowed herself a moment to mourn, then she moved on. The regional finals of the NAEC were scheduled for July, and Yushi's preparation had reached new heights of intensity. She and Lu Chen spent their days in the library, their evenings in Lu Chen's small apartment near campus, their weekends running mock competitions and drilling each other on weak points. The days blurred together, marked only by the number of practice cases they had completed and the improvement in their scores. Yushi had never worked so hard in her life. She had also never felt so alive. "You're different now," Lu Chen observed one afternoon, as they took a break from studying. "Different how?" "More focused. More confident. When I first met you, you were like a closed door. Now you're an open window." "I was going through some things," she said. "I'm past them now. I'm glad." He was quiet for a moment. "I've been meaning to tell you something." "What?" "I admire you, Yushi. Not just your intelligence or your work ethic. I admire who you are as a person. The way you handle difficult situations. The way you don't let other people bring you down." Her heart swelled. "Thank you. I mean it. You're the most impressive person I've met in a long time." She looked at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, and felt something shift inside her. A wall she had been maintaining for months, years, a lifetime, crumbling, just a little. "I admire you too," she said quietly, "more than you know." The regional finals were held in Nanjing, a 3-hour train ride from Jindu. The competition spanned 3 days, with the case study release on Friday afternoon, preparation through Saturday, and presentations on Sunday. Yushi and Lu Chen traveled together, sharing a compartment on the high-speed train. They reviewed their materials one last time, testing each other on key concepts, running through possible case scenarios. The case study was released at exactly 2:00 p.m. on Friday. It was a 45-page document about a mid-sized manufacturing company facing financial distress, declining revenues, mounting debts, and a management team that seemed unable to make decisions. Yushi read through the document twice, highlighting key information, making notes in the margins. Lu Chen did the same, his pen moving quickly across the page. "This is a restructuring case," he said. "They want us to figure out how to save the company. They also want to know if the company can be saved." Yushi pointed to a section of the document. "Look at the debt structure. They have loans coming due in 6 months that they can't refinance. So we need to propose a debt restructuring, or an equity injection. Bring in a strategic investor. That dilutes the existing shareholders. It also gives the company a fighting chance. They debated the merits of each approach, weighing pros and cons, stress testing their assumptions. By dinner time, they had the outline of a plan. They worked through the night. Lu Qin built the financial models while Yushi analyzed the market conditions and competitive landscape. They reconvened at dawn, exhausted but satisfied. The key is the presentation, Yushi said, looking at their work spread across the hotel room. We have to make the judges believe in our solution. Then we make it convincing. Lu Qin looked at her, and despite the exhaustion, there was fire in his eyes. We've got this, Yushi. I know we do. She believed him. The presentation was scheduled for Sunday at 10:00 a.m. Yushi woke at 5:00, unable to sleep any longer. She showered and dressed in the business suit she had brought, a charcoal gray blazer and matching skirt. Simple and professional. Exactly the kind of outfit that said, I belong here. Lu Qin was already in the lobby when she came down, wearing a navy blue suit that fit him perfectly. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered in his eyes. You look professional, he said. You look like you actually slept. 4 hours. It'll do. I got 3. Overachiever. They shared a small smile, the tension of the competition momentarily forgotten. The presentation hall was a large auditorium, with a stage at the front and rows of seats for the audience. Other teams were already there, some looking confident, others visibly nervous. Yushi and Lu Qin were scheduled to present third. They sat in the front row, watching the first 2 teams, taking mental notes of what worked and what didn't. Team 1 was solid, good analysis, clean presentation, well-structured arguments, but their recommendations were conservative. They had played it safe, suggesting minor adjustments rather than bold changes. Team 2 was flashy, great visuals, energetic delivery, impressive charts. But Yushi noticed an error in their financial model, a basic miscalculation in the cash flow projections. See that? She whispered to Lu Qin. I saw it. If the judges are paying attention, they'll catch it. If they catch it, it'll cost them points. Maybe enough to drop them out of contention. Good. That's one less team to worry about. Then it was their turn. Yushi's heart hammered as she walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, the judges' faces a blur of serious expressions. She took her position at the podium, while Lu Qin stood by the screen, ready to advance the slides. She took a deep breath. Good morning, honorable judges. Thank you for the opportunity to present our analysis of bright future manufacturing. This is a company at a crossroads, bleeding cash in the short term, but with underlying strengths that position it for a remarkable turnaround. She delivered the opening with confidence, her voice steady. Lu Qin took over for the financial analysis, walking through the numbers with practiced ease. They traded off smoothly, each section flowing into the next, their voices complementing each other. The Candé session was brutal. The judges asked sharp questions, probing for weaknesses in their assumptions, challenging their projections. But Yushi and Lu Qin had prepared for this. They answered each question with conviction, backing up their responses with data and logic. When the session ended, Yushi felt like she had run a marathon. Her legs were shaking as they walked off the stage. We did it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We did it. Lu Qin's voice was equally quiet. Now we wait. The awards ceremony was held at 6:00 p.m. Yushi sat in the audience, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as the MC announced the winners. Third place, Team 7, from Nanjing University of Finance and Economics. Applause. A team in yellow shirts stood up, looking thrilled. Second place, Team 3, from Shanghai University of Economics. More applause. Yushi's heart sank. They hadn't placed. All that work, all those sleepless nights, and they had come away with nothing. And first place, Team 5, from Jindu University. She heard the words, but they didn't process at first. Team 5. That was them. They had registered as Team 5. We won, Lu Qin said, his voice disbelieving. Yushi, We won. She turned to look at him. And he was smiling, a real smile. Wide and unguarded. She had never seen him smile like that before. It transformed his face, making him look younger, brighter, freer. We won, she repeated. And the reality of it hit her like a wave. She threw her arms around him before she could think about it. He hugged her back, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her close. For a moment, they just stood there, holding each other, the crowd's applause washing over them like a tide. We did it, he whispered in her ear. We did it. They pulled apart, both of them flushed, both of them avoiding each other's eyes, but the warmth of his arms lingered. And Yushi carried it with her as she walked to the stage to accept the award. The trophy was heavy in her hands. Silver, shaped like a rising phoenix, with their university's name engraved at the base. She held it up, and the audience cheered. In that moment, standing on the stage with the lights bright and Lu Chen by her side, Yushi felt like she had finally, truly arrived. She had done it. She had won, without sacrificing her integrity. Without being dragged into someone else's mess, without compromising who she was. She had done it on her own terms. 3 years later, June, graduation. Yushi stood on the main stage of Jindu University's grand auditorium, wearing her graduation gown and cap, the tassel swinging with every movement. The sun streamed through the high windows, casting patterns of light across the polished floor. She was graduating with a 3.9 GPA. The highest in the accounting department. She had won 2 national competitions and 3 academic scholarships. Her application to the master's program at Shanghai University of Finance had been accepted, full scholarship, with a research assistantship, and standing in the audience, in the 3rd row, was Lu Chen. They had both been accepted into the same graduate program. They would be going to Shanghai together, continuing their partnership in a new city, a new chapter. A new life. The dean called her name. Lin Yushi, Bachelor of Accounting, summa cum laude. She walked across the stage, accepted her diploma, shook hands with the faculty. The applause washed over her, warm and affirming. She looked out at the audience and found Lu Chen's face. He was smiling, clapping, his eyes bright with pride. This was the moment she had been working toward. The culmination of 3 years of effort, sacrifice, and determination, and she had done it on her own terms. The graduation party was held in the campus garden, the same place where she and Lu Chen had sat after the regional finals. String lights decorated the trees, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Tables were laden with food and drinks, and music played softly from hidden speakers. Yushi circulated through the crowd, accepting congratulations, posing for photos, making small talk with professors and classmates, but her eyes kept finding Lu Chen across the garden, doing the same circuit, always gravitating back toward her. They finally converged near the dessert table. So, he said, you're officially a graduate. Officially. How does it feel? Surreal. Like I've been holding my breath for 3 years and I can finally exhale. Don't exhale too much. Graduate school starts in September. The professor I've been in contact with said the workload is intense. I know. I've already started reading the recommended texts. Naturally. He smiled. A soft, fond smile that made her heart flutter. I have something for you. A graduation gift. Something like that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Yushi's breath caught in her throat. Lu Chen. What is that? Open it. She took the box with trembling hands and opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark velvet, was a necklace, a simple silver chain with a pendant shaped like a phoenix, wings outstretched, rising from an abstract flame. It's to remind you of what you've already achieved, he said, so that when graduate school gets hard, and it will get hard, you'll remember that you've overcome difficult things before. You've risen from the ashes. Yushi. More than once. Her eyes burned with unshed tears. It's beautiful. Can I put it on you? She turned, lifting her hair. His fingers brushed against the back of her neck as he clasped the necklace, sending shivers down her spine. The pendant settled against her collarbone. Warm and perfect. There, he said softly. Perfect. She turned back to face him. I have something for you too. You don't have to. I want to. She pulled an envelope from her bag, the edges slightly worn from being carried around for weeks. Open it. He opened the envelope and pulled out the letter inside. As he read it, his expression shifted from curiosity to surprise to something that looked almost like wonder. Is this real? He asked. If you want it to be. The letter wasn't a formal document. It was a handwritten note, personal and heartfelt. It was a proposal, not of marriage, but of partnership, of life, of a future built together. Asterisk if you want. Asterisk she had written. Asterisk we can rent an apartment together in Shanghai. 2 bedrooms. So we each have our own space for studying. But together. I want to build something real with you. Lu Chen. Something that lasts. Asterisk Lu Chen looked up, his eyes bright. Are you asking me to move in with you? I'm asking you to build a life with me. Starting in Shanghai. Ending wherever we want it to end. He laughed. A sound of pure joy that drew glances from nearby partygoers. Lin Yushi. You never do anything halfway. Do you? I learned from the best. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. Yes. He whispered into her hair. Yes. I want to build a life with you. She closed her eyes, feeling his warmth, his heartbeat, his presence. The phoenix pendant rested against her collarbone, a symbol of everything she had achieved and everything she had yet to become. The party continued around them, the music playing, the laughter rising. But Yushi stayed in Lu Chen's arms, feeling the future stretching out before her, bright, uncertain, and full of possibility. Later that night, after the party had ended and the campus had grown quiet, Yushi sat alone in her dorm room for the last time. The room was bare, her belongings packed into boxes that would be shipped to Shanghai. The walls were empty, free of the posters and photos that had made this space hers. The glow-in-the-dark stars were still on the ceiling. She had decided to leave them for the next student. A small gift to an unknown stranger. She sat on the edge of her stripped bed and looked around the room that had been her home for 3 years. So much had happened here. So much had changed. In her past life, she had left this room in disgrace, escorted out by campus security, her belongings packed by strangers. She had never had the chance to say goodbye. This time, she was leaving on her own terms, with honors, with a future waiting for her. She thought about Meng Yao, who had transferred to a small school in their home province. They hadn't spoken since the investigation. Yushi had heard through mutual acquaintances that Meng Yao was doing okay, not great, but okay. She was seeing a therapist, working on herself, trying to rebuild her life. Yushi hoped she succeeded. Despite everything, she hoped Meng Yao found a way to be happy. Not because Meng Yao deserved it, but because holding on to anger was too heavy a burden. She thought about her parents, who would be arriving tomorrow for the graduation ceremony. They had called her last week, their voices thick with pride. We always knew you could do it, her mother had said. We never doubted you. They had doubted. In her past life, they had doubted everything about her. But this time, she had given them no reason to doubt. She thought about Lu Chen, who was probably in his own room right now, packing his own boxes, thinking about their future together. She thought about the apartment they would rent, the classes they would take, the life they would build. And she thought about the girl she used to be, the one who had trusted too easily, loved too freely, and been destroyed by someone she called a friend. That girl was gone now. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, more careful, but also more hopeful. Because she had learned that the world didn't have to be cruel. That trust could be rebuilt. That love could be real. The phoenix pendant caught the light, glinting gold in the dim room. Yushi touched it, feeling the warmth of the metal against her skin. She was ready. The next morning, the sun rose over Jindu University, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Yushi stood at the window of her dorm room, watching the light spread across the campus. The cherry blossom trees were in full bloom, their petals drifting through the air like snow. Students were already moving across the paths, backpacks slung over shoulders, lives unfolding in ways they couldn't yet imagine. She had been one of them. 3 years ago, she had walked into this university as a freshman, full of hopes and dreams she hadn't known how to protect. Now she was leaving as someone different, Someone who had learned that the most important relationship she would ever have was the one with herself. That protecting her own future wasn't selfish, it was necessary. That sometimes, the bravest thing you could do was walk away from the people who would drag you down. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lu Chin. Asterisk ready to go. Asterisk, she smiled and typed back. Asterisk ready. Asterisk, she picked up her bag, took one last look around the room, and walked out the door. The sun was warm on her face. The air was fresh and clean, and the future stretched out before her, bright and full of possibility. Lin Yushi was going to be just fine. The end. Epilogue. 1 year later. Shanghai. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely large enough for one person to cook in. The windows faced north, so the light was never quite right, and the heating system made strange noises at night. It was perfect. Yushi sat at the desk in her room, surrounded by textbooks and research papers. Graduate school was challenging, exactly as she had expected. The coursework was intense, the expectations high, the competition fierce, but she was thriving. Her professors impressed by her analytical ability and work ethic. In the living room, she could hear Lu Chen on the phone, talking to his advisor about a research project. His voice was calm and measured, the same tone he used when explaining difficult concepts to his study group. She smiled and turned back to her work. Her phone buzzed with a message. Asterisk dinner at 7. I found a new hot pot place near the supermarket. Asterisk, she typed back. Asterisk, I'll be there. Save the tripe for me. Always. Asterisk, she put down her phone and looked at the necklace she still wore every day, the phoenix pendant that had become her talisman, a reminder of how far she had come. Through the open door, she could see Lu Chen pacing in the living room, still on the phone, gesturing animatedly about something. She watched him for a moment, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. This was her life now, small and ordinary and perfect. She had been reborn, and this time, she was living it for herself.